Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we are here today to talk about dumpsters. Yes, you heard me right. We're talking about dumpsters. We're talking about that green monster in the parking lot outside your restaurant. We're talking about that trash bin in your apartment complex. We're talking about that place of refuge. Refuge. Refuse, not refuge. I know you're trying to grab a hold of. Why is Revealing the Truth talking about dumpsters? Because we want you to find a way out of the dumpster. Because we're looking for the path to lead you out of the dumpster, because every one of us have had that dumpster moment. I want to introduce you to a friend of mine, Dr. Reggie Padin. Reggie, welcome to the show.
So much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Well, you're quite welcome. Reggie is an optimist, a visionary, an educator, an entrepreneur, a writer, a training and development expert, an executive coach, and an ordained minister. His academic credentials include a master's in divinity, a master's in business administration, and a doctorate in education. When he's not inspiring and training others to come out of their dumpsters, he's most likely attending a sporting event, visiting a unique restaurant, or simply thinking. You can visit him at www.reggie, R-E-G-G-I-E, Padin, P-A-D-I-N.com. So, Reggie, you were a high school dropout.
I was.
In the United States, in Puerto Rico, where
actually in the United States. I decided to, well, let me backtrack a little bit. I moved from the United States to Canada. Okay. And so the change there were too many changes in my life at that point, and they frustrated me as a young man. I felt that the system was not for me, and I gave up and decided to drop out at a very early age.
How old were you?
I was 17 when I dropped out.
Okay. And so you left the United States, you went to Canada. What was the attraction with Canada?
Actually, my dad moved us around a lot, and so he was working up there in Toronto, Canada, and so that was the attraction. That was the reason why we ended up living in Canada.
Okay. And how did you find life in Toronto?
Well, as a kid, it was okay, but I had to grow up pretty fast, and so as an adult, without an education, it was very difficult, very trying times, and to add to that, I married very young, had a child very young, and so that compounded the situation for me. Without an education in Toronto, which is a very one of the most expensive cities in the world.
Absolutely. So what was life like for someone who had dropped out of high school, working by hauling garbage by hand out of a dumpster?
Yeah, well, the story to that was without an education, it was very tough to find employment. During must have been 1980, 89, 90. There was a terrible recession in Toronto, in Canada, actually. And so if it was tough to find job, period. But you can imagine not having an education and having to try to look for a job to support a young family. It was very difficult. So I jumped around from, odd job here and there, mostly cleaning and janitorial services. And I finally found my father-in-law felt a little pity for me, and he brought me into the company where he worked, and I became a gopher. I became the guy who had to if the deliveries needed to be made, if the workshop needed to be cleaned, that type of thing. That became my job. Little did I know the company was actually experiencing some tough difficulties, financial difficulties. They were going bankrupt, actually. And so they had to cut some of their expenses, and one of the expenses they ended up cutting was the waste management company. And so I got a call one day from my boss, he over the loudspeaker, to go into his office, and he says, I still remember Lee, it was his name, very, very short French guy. Reggie, get a company truck, and go around the company and to every single dumpster, get inside the dumpster, get the garbage out of there, take it to the landfill. And so I became the waste management company. So, I'm sure that you've walked by a dumpster in the middle of the summer. Not a very pleasant situation. Now imagine being chest deep inside a dumpster hauling garbage by hand. That messed me up. It messed my self-esteem, of course. I didn't see a future for myself, and so it was a very trying time during those days. And to top it off, it was in the middle of the summer, so it was very, very difficult, very difficult.
Nasty. I would say it was nasty.
Yeah, it was truly a dumpster moment. I was inside the dumpster, and so that's where the premise for this book ultimately came out of.
So you were raised in a faith-based family?
Yes, my dad is an ordained minister in a Spanish-speaking denomination, and so I do have that's probably one of the greatest things in my life has been the faith foundation and understanding your purpose. That God has a purpose for your life, and what you have to do is just figure that out and just be obedient to what that purpose is. And so that has been instrumental in helping me reshape my life in the direction that I definitely ultimately ended up taking.
So you're very familiar with the words Padre Nuestro, esto en cielo.
Padre Nuestro, yes, of course.
Santificado. Yes, of course. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Yes.
So how did you get so far away from where you started? Was it pure rebellion? Was it dissatisfaction? Was it pride? What was the motivating factor for you to step out in the direction you did, which was really not a direction at all?
Yeah, I think it was a combination. I mean, it's a combination of youthful foolishness, with some rebellion spirit there as well. Giving up, not really seeing the importance of an education. The truth of the matter is that my family, my immediate family, nobody went to college. My dad dropped out when he was in 8th grade. My mom ended up finishing high school. None of my uncles or aunts or cousins had a formal education. And so, and nobody in our community did either. And so you tend to grow up with this mentality that, well, they don't have it and they seem to be okay. I don't need it either. And so, I struggle coming from Puerto Rico. I came as a young man. I was 10. So I struggled with the language and struggle with the system. And so I, ended up throwing my hands up and just giving up on the whole educational system. And I write about that because it was, I still remember it quite vividly when I decided, that's it, no more for me. I'm gonna make it on my own. And I mean, we're faith-based people. I mean, we understand that God uses those situations to really shape us. Mm-hmm. And I think without that experience, I don't think I would be the person that I am today, and I wouldn't be in the positions that I am today, and the book wouldn't be here. And so,
well, you're the living, breathing of Romans 8:28. For all things work together for good for those who love Him and called according to His purpose. And
absolutely.
Now, you have a wife. You have a child.
Yes.
What's going on with her at this time? What's the dynamic of you being a young father? You have a child. You have wrestled with self-esteem.
Yeah.
Worthiness, right. Ability to provide. All those things are a struggle for you.
Yeah, all of those things. And actually, for me, what started happening with me was when my son was born. I remember holding him, and looking into his angelic face, and really panicking, to put it mildly,
Hmm.
panicking, asking myself, what kind of life am I gonna give this child? What kind of example am I setting for this child? Um, my wife never used the words loser, um, but I knew that I was disappointing her, and I was definitely not. It wasn't what she wanted in her life, and so all those things played a big role. And I remember coming down from the landfill, driving the truck back to the company, and thinking to myself, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of this dumpster. And that's where I think the wheels started turning. And I was always very involved in the church with my father, and I always had this tendency to counsel people, and to people listen to me, and I had the ability to speak. And
Right.
so I felt, maybe I'm going to use this experience, what I'm going through right now. I'm going to get myself out of it. I'm going to become a living example of what it means to better yourself and take a different turn for the better. And I want to use that story to help others. And so that's where the whole journey for me just turned.
How old are you at this point when you had this cathartic experience, this revelation?
It was probably, I was 2021.
Okay.
And so I remember, um, I felt, well, I want to teach. I want to teach others, and I want to do it at the highest level possible. Which meant, for me, it meant, becoming a doctor, and being able to teach at that level. And so you can get a doctorate without getting a master's, and you can
Hmm.
get a master's without getting a bachelor's, and you can get a bachelor's without getting a GED. So I had to work myself backwards and say, I have to go and get a GED. And I remember I was very motivated. I went into a community center
Hmm.
where they prepped young people to get ready for the GED exam, and usually it was a 6 month program. Um, I think it took me just a few weeks to plow through the material, and I remember going to my counselor and say, I'm ready. And he looked at me, and he really didn't want me to fail, because he felt that if I went unprepared to the examination and I failed, that I would give up. And but sure thing, I went in there, took the examinations, and I remember I was on a trip to the West Coast with another friend. We were doing some inner city ministries
Hmm.
down in Los Angeles, when I got the call from my wife saying, it came in the mail. It came in the mail. And I said, what came in the mail? It's just your something from the state. Can I open it? And I said, of course, open it. And so she opened it. I was on the phone with her, and sure enough, there it was, my GED, freshly printed. And so that became the whole. I felt that if I could do that, and I applied myself, I could reach any goal that I really set for myself.
Well, that's wonderful. So this began a path of really pulling yourself out of the dumpster
Yes,
and beginning the climb.
yes.
Now, what city are you living in at this point?
Well, we moved from Toronto, and we did a whole loop, upstate New York. Actually, we were living in the city. Well, it's not even a city. It's a little town of called Amsterdam, New York, between Albany and Rochester. Um, when this happened, and I remember, after getting my GED, I enrolled in community college. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to go to college, so I jumped around a little bit there, and ended up in the city of Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
I know it
By
well.
this point, we had 3 children, and the fourth one was on his way.
Mm.
So it took me a little bit between my GED and when I started college. I started college at the age of 25. and so I thought, well, I have this longing for teaching, and so I thought it was going to be in the ministry. And my dad is a minister, and so that to me was, I thought that was the direction that I wanted to take. So I went to a small college, a Christian college in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and I met a professor who became a mentor to me. And I remember my first semester saying to myself, that's what it was like confirmation. That's what I want to do. I want to teach like this gentleman does. He was
Now, were
so.
you in Lancaster, or did you happen to be in Grantham?
I'm sorry?
Were you in Lancaster proper? Is that where you went to school?
Yeah, yeah. Lancaster, yeah, it was Eaton Road. I don't know if you're familiar with.
I am. I'm from
Yeah.
Pennsylvania. I've been up to Messiah College in Grantham many times.
Yes.
So,
And
very
so I was so motivated with really going for that goal that I finished a 4-year degree in 3.
wow.
And so I remember probably in my second year, I said, well, this is not going to be enough education. So I started looking for seminaries, and traveled to Boston, to Gorton Conwell, and traveled to other seminaries. But the problem was that, a lot of these seminaries were not equipped to handle a young seminarian with a wife and 4 children. There was
Right.
no housing, and it was very expensive. Some of those cities were expensive. So I ended up after college. I ended up working for a small inner city church in Holland, Michigan, and it was very convenient because they had a seminary in town. So it just all worked very, very well. I could now was freshly minted bachelor,
Right.
a graduate, and so I was attending seminary and working in the church. So that was. That worked out very, very well.
So you went on, you got your doctorate in education.
Yes. So the journey to that actually was after I finished seminary. I was tired of the cold. I had lived in Buffalo, New York, Toronto, Canada, upstate New York, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and now Holland, Michigan. I was done with cold weather. And I remember going to my church superiors and saying, "Look, are you guys like planning on opening a new church somewhere in the South?" And so they said, "Well, as a matter of fact, we are. We're thinking of starting new works in Florida." And so I came down. I had to go through a whole set of assessments to see whether or not I was, I guess, prone to succeed in that area. And so I took a tour in Florida, and I ended up in South Florida.
Okay.
Started to work with the church. Of course, my family was with me. It was a big transition for them. By that time, I had a son who was a junior in high school, a sophomore going into junior year. I had a son in middle school, 2 kids in elementary school. So this was it for me, right? I needed to lay down some roots in South Florida for my children's sake. This was 2006. In 2007 is when the economy started tanking here in Florida. Actually, before the economic meltdown of 2008, 2009, South Florida was the epicenter of that. And so the church dried out. They had no more funds. And I could see the handwriting on the wall that was going to happen. So I knew that I was going to be asked to go back north because that's where our churches were, and I was just not ready or willing to do that. And so I ended up enrolling in an MBA program down here in South Florida.
Okay.
And when the knock came. And the ultimatum came, hey, you need to move back or we're going to have to sever your funding. I was ready, and I ended up applying for a position as a corporate trainer. And that's where the second chapter, I guess, of my career began, where to this day that's what I really do. I became the dean of the corporate university there. A couple of years later, I became the dean of another multi-billion-dollar company here in South Florida. And in that process, I said, I told myself, I said, look, now is your time to get your doctorate. And so 2009, I enrolled in a doctoral program here at Nova Southeastern University down here in Florida. And the rest is history. I mean, I've had a very successful life as a result of those moves. And so I tell people, look, I'm not special. I don't think I'm special. I don't think I'm tremendously brilliant, but I do work hard, and I've laid out a plan, and I execute very, very well. And I tell people that is the key right there. The key is make sure that you understand what it is that you want to do, and then just execute. So it's been a great story.
Now, if I were to ask your wife what she was thinking when you were 17, when she saw you at 20 climbing out of a dumpster or coming home smelling like the dumpster, do you think that she would have seen or envisioned this great success for you?
It's funny that you should ask that. My children are grown now. My oldest son is 25. He's going to be 26 years old this year. My second son is 24. Mm-hmm. My daughter's 21. And my youngest son has just turned 20. And my daughter was visiting for North Carolina. She ended up moving to Durham, North Carolina. And we were in the car. She came to visit, and we went out to a restaurant. And my wife said this to my daughter. She said, I always saw the potential in your dad. And so, I don't want to romanticize our relationship. We've had some bumps along the way, but she said that. She said, I always believed that your dad was gonna do great things, and so I think if you ask her, she'll probably say, I had my doubts there, but she kind of knew that something good was going to happen.
Good. And how is your father-in-law still living?
Yes, both our sets of parents are still alive. So
okay,
we're
so
very blessed.
The father-in-law and your dad that wound up, they've watched this whole thing.
They have, they've seen it firsthand. My parents too. At first I remember my dad wasn't so sure as to what I was doing, but they're so proud of my accomplishments and the fact that they have a doctor for a son, in an education. So a professor, I teach as a professor as well. And so it's been very, just a humbling experience for me to be able to influence my family that way. My nephews and nieces now see that example. My own children are, incredibly, doing very well. And so I like to think that, my decision to go in this direction has played a very, very important role in my entire family.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. We're talking with Reggie Padin, Dr. Reggie R. Padin, about his story, Get Out of the Dumpster, a true story of overcoming limitations. That someone who writes that he was a high school dropout who worked for pennies hauling garbage by hand out of a dumpster. Let's be real. When was the last time you walked by a dumpster and said to yourself, I want to live in there? But the truth is, we all have dumpster moments that can last anywhere from hours to years. They happen because of our fears, doubts, confusion, economic problems, emotional turmoil, toxic relationships, age, race, sex, and income level don't matter. A person can be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company or the janitor at the same company. The bottom line is we all have experiences that can limit our ability to reach something higher. When we come back, we're going to go down this journey. We've found the background, and now we're going to look at some of the inspirational, faith-based concepts that Reggie has found that worked in his life and can work in yours.